Picking up again, there are types of drawing in which linear perspective is not used because it's communicating a different idea or for a different purpose. Technical drawings, sets of instructions, like if you get furniture from IKEA and you have to put it together, those diagrams will generally be drawn in an isometric or axonometric understanding. And basically, if you're looking at something that's done in either one of these ideas, the object looks distorted if you're trying to force it into a linear perspective understanding. So in other words, none of these lines diminish. We have parallel lines going to the upper right. We have parallel lines going to the upper left. And in axonometric drawing, we have 3 sets of parallel lines going one direction and 3 sets going the other direction. We have vertical lines and so forth, but if this is linear perspective, there's no diminishment and it looks warped. It doesn't really look like a real cube. It looks like this back corner is higher visually than the front corner. And so we have the top being warped. But axonometric drawing is that which it's kind of based off a 360-degree circle, and you divide that circle into thirds every 120 degrees. And so all your angles relate to that off the horizontal or the vertical. So this is a 60-degree angle, and the corresponding angle on the other side is also 60 degrees, and that's of course half of 120. So everything works off the 120 idea, dividing that circle into perfect thirds. And so you'll get exactness. You'll basically see 2 sides of a piece of an object in this understanding, plus a top or a bottom. Oblique perspective is somewhat the same thing. It keeps the front face of something in one-point perspective, and then all the parallel faces that would normally diminish in linear perspective are actually denoted with 45-degree angle lines. So everything in an oblique is 45 and 90-degree angles. Again, if you're trying to force linear perspective understanding, this looks poorly drawn. Another thing to understand about linear perspective is that human form, animal form, all forms actually follow linear perspective in terms of our understanding. And understand too that linear perspective is the system that's imposed on top of, or it's the matrix that's laid on top of how we actually perceive things. And so obviously with the isometric drawings, there's other ways of communicating things, but linear perspective appears to be much more accurate in terms of creating a illusion of three-dimensionality, illusion of volume. So in linear perspective, forms, features, we're looking up here, but we're seeing some diminishing lines and so forth. So human form follows linear perspective, one-point perspective. Three-quarter view would be 2-point. This would be actually a 3-point perspective. We're looking up, we're looking down, and notice that this eye will be larger than this eye, and those perspective angles diminish as we move toward the lower right in this particular drawing. More Da Vinci, some figure gestures, and notice that they also follow linear perspective. Although he hasn't drawn those orthogonal lines in, the figures are still following that in terms of how they're situated in space, the gestural understanding, the foreshortening of the figures to depict the fact that they are volumetric and in space. Notice also that the figures are more gesture than they are contour, and so you can see that his technique was very often to set up the structure and then build out the contour on that. So he used gesture to build up the structure and then added the contour on top. So you see, look how he gestured the feet and how he gestured the thigh and the calf and so forth. More car drawings, I guess these are Formula One ideas, and notice all the orthogonal lines to help get the sense of accuracy, to help get the sense of this is a volumetric form, and to help us understand by looking at one point of view in each drawing, we get a sense of other points of view, or we get the sense of the fullness of this volumetric form. And it also helps communicate it because it's a fairly complex form. There's a lot of different planes, faces, angles. It's a multifaceted object. Foreshortened distortion. When we see something, we see point by point by point. We look at one thing at a time within our visual field. A camera looks in planar understanding. They see the whole plane, and then they see the plane behind, and then the plane behind. So whereas the human eye is able to land on a single point, the camera just takes in the entire visual field, or the entire frame of reference that it's being pointed at. And so within that, we'll get things like foreshortening, which is a variety of three-point perspective and can be used that way, but it's basically extreme diminishment. So we know that this apple and this hand are smaller than the guy's head, but they're almost twice as tall and as wide as the guy's head in this foreshortened perspective. And this extreme foreshortening is used to help create a greater sense of space. It's used here in a way to help make this guy look monumental. And he's really, about to bust out of the picture plane here. We're looking up at him, so he's above eye level. It's like we're on the ground. He's looking down at us, so we better watch out. He's got his fists going, but notice how large his fists are compared to his head, and how large his forearms and upper arms are, and his chest. So he's distorted physically, kind of like the Incredible Hulk, but then he's foreshortened for effect. And even this guy, the Iron Man guy back here, is foreshortened for effect. He's looking smaller, he's further away, so we are creating a sense of volumetric illusion. But his hand is a lot larger than it normally would be. If you compare the size of the hand to the head, this is a lot larger, so we get that sense of deep space, that sense of depth, as we relate this to this, and as we relate this to the head here, and look at the size of the fist here compared to his right fist over here. So foreshortening is something that we'll use to increase the sense of depth of field. It's something that we use to create monumentality, or the other direction, minusculeness. I don't know what the opposite of monumentality is. Things can look really small and really far away. So it is a device it's an exaggeration device that we can employ when appropriate to help communicate what we're trying to communicate.